Hello everyone. Today I'm going to put the tube lines in order, based on their age. Oh, but there's a twist. See, the question of the age of the different underground lines has more than one answer. It all started in well, no. In the case of this video, it all started a fortnight ago when I saw a discussion on social media where someone said that the Waterloo and City line was the newest tube line. And someone else replied that, no it isn't. It is a very old tube line indeed, older than the majority of the other lines. But here's the thing, they're both right. So let's investigate. Oh, and by the way, things are about to get seriously nerdy around here, even by this channel's standards, so buckle in. So the first way to do it is what I'll call the standard order, when the lines are generally considered, by historians, to have first opened. That is to say, when the first section opened to the public. That goes thus. The first section of the Metropolitan line opened in 1863. The Hammersmith and City line follows shortly after, in 1864. The District comes along in 1868. Now the Circle line is where we hit our first complication. It's never been a separate line, physically speaking. It's a route formed from part of the Metropolitan line and part of the District line. So you could argue that it opens in 1863 with the first section of the Metropolitan. However, I am going to say that it opens in 1884. That's when the track necessary to complete the circle was finished. That is the first time you could take a train around the entire circle. 6 years later, in 1890, you get the first section of the Northern Line, which is the City and South London Railway from Stockwell to King William Street. The Northern Line is complicated, though, because really it's 3 lines in a black trench coat. You could argue that the Northern Line really opens in 1907, when the Charing Cross, Euston and Hampstead Railway opened. That's the Charing Cross branch of the Northern Line all the way up to Golders Green. But I'm going to say 1890, making the Northern Line number 5 on this list. The City and South London Railway led to a sort of tube mania. So from the late 1890s you get a whole raft of tube lines. The Waterloo and City line opened in 1898. The Central line comes along in 1900. The Bakerloo line shows up in March 1906, followed by the Piccadilly line in December of that year. Then the Hampstead line, if you like. Then things go quiet. Tube lines extend, contract, join up and absorb other tracks, but there's no completely new tube line until 1968, when the first section of the Victoria line opens between Highbury and Islington and Walthamstow Central. And finally, the Jubilee line has its grand opening in 1979. This is not a complete list. I've not counted any tube lines that no longer exist, so no Northern City line, no East London line, no Tower Subway. Nor have I counted any railways in London that fall under TfL but aren't the Underground, because when you do that, things get really complicated. So, no Overground, trams, DLR, TfL Rail, or Elizabeth Line. But there is another order we could go in. There are several lines that existed but didn't get their identity as a tube line until later on. So if we do that, we get Metropolitan, District, Northern, Central, Bakerloo, Piccadilly. The Circle line, or Inner Circle as it was known back in the day, first appeared on the tube map as a separate line in 1949. Then we get the Victoria and Jubilee. The physical Hammersmith and City line first opened in 1864, but it was considered part of the Metropolitan line until 1990, when it gained its pink colour and appeared as a separate thing on the map. Something similar happened with the East London line, but we're not talking about that. The Waterloo and City line opened in 1898, but was to all intents and purposes part of the London and South Western Railway, which was the main line company that owned Waterloo Station. So for the thick end of 100 years it belonged to whoever owned Waterloo. It wasn't until 1994, with the advent of rail privatisation, that it was handed over to the Underground. So that is how it can be both a very old line and the newest line. Alright, how about we step it up a notch? How about we order them by the time they were completed? When the last section of track was finished. Here we get a very different order. Number 1 is the Waterloo and City line. I'll say this for the Waterloo and City line, it's never tried to be anything other than what it was built to be. No branches, no extensions. My job would be a lot easier if they were all like that. Next is the district. In 1902 it was extended to Upminster, which is still the current eastern limit of service. Then the Bakerloo, whose final extension to Harrow and Wealdstone came in 1917. Now, if you know the history of the Bakerloo line, you'll know that it took over the Stanmore branch in 1939, but since that's not a current part of the line, I'm not going to count it. Same for other services that no longer exist. I could talk about the district going to Southend until 1939, for instance. The Bakerloo is also the one most likely to cause an upset in the future, with ongoing plans to extend it to the southeast. The Metropolitan comes next, opening to Watford in 1925. I suppose that means I'm going to have to do a centenary video later this year, not until November though. The Hammersmith and Cities service was extended to Barking in 1936, where it remains. In 1949, the Central Line took over the railway to Ongar. It has since been cut back to Epping, which it reached that same year. The Victoria Line crossed beneath the river in 1971 and reached Brixton. Now we have another gap. Next up, the Jubilee extension to Stratford, opened in 1999. The Piccadilly Line gained a spur off to Heathrow Terminal 5 in 2008. These days, the Circle Line is not really a circle because for operational reasons it runs over the Hammersmith and City Line to Hammersmith. That service began in 2009. And finally, you have the Northern Line, which was rerouted through Bank in 2023. Okay then, let's go hard level. How do the tube lines rank if you go by the oldest section of the route, even if it was not part of the Underground when it was built? Here we go. Now the real upset is the Central Line. The section from Stratford to Loughton was opened by the Eastern Counties Railway in 1856. Next you have the Metropolitan from Paddington to Farringdon, 1863. But since that section also carries the Hammersmith and City and Circle lines, we have to count them as well, as joint number 2. Number 3 is the District, 1868, South Kensington to Westminster. The Piccadilly line partially runs over track acquired from the District line, who, in turn, acquired part of their route from the London and South Western Railway, so that means its oldest section is from Turnham Green to Ravenscourt Park, opened in 1869. It doesn't stop at Ravenscourt Park, and then it only stops at Turnham Green at the beginning and end of the day, but the route dates from then. The oldest section of the Northern Line is way out. It's the line from East Finchley to High Barnet, which first appeared under the Great Northern Railway in 1872. The Jubilee line is remarkably ancient if you take it from its oldest section, which was formerly part of the Metropolitan Railway from Finchley Road to Willesden Green, opened in 1879. Good old Waterloo and City. That comes next in 1898. Now the Victoria line is a very modern line, but for one twist. It partially shadows the Northern City line, and London Transport were keen on providing cross-platform interchange between the lines. In order to achieve this, at Highbury and Islington the lines were rearranged in 1964. The northbound Northern City Line platform became the southbound Victoria Line platform. At Finsbury Park, one of the Northern City platforms was handed over to the Piccadilly Line and the other was handed over to the Victoria Line, which means that technically the oldest sections of the Victoria Line date from 1904. And finally, well, here's an irony. The Bakerloo line, the line that's famous now for being the most retro if you're feeling kind, or the most dilapidated if you're not, is actually the newest. The section from Lambeth North to Baker Street opened in 1906. So there you have it, the oldest tube lines 4 different ways. There are other ways you could do it. If you go by oldest station, the Bakerloo is the oldest, with Harrow and Wealdstone opening in 1837. If you go by first acquired by the entity that would eventually become the London Underground, it's the District. There are no doubt others I haven't thought of. Maybe it would be fun/insanity inducing to put the stations in order of age. Now that is complicated. Anyway, I'll leave that one for your consideration. I hope you enjoyed this chronological tale from the tube. If you did, please feel free to leave a like or even subscribe, or both, or neither. I'm not your dad. I would like as ever to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the repurposing to my old branch line. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.